Good afternoon. My name is Davide Ponzini. I'm a professor of urban planning here at Politecnico di Milano, together with Paolo Scrivano, Zachary Jones, Anita Martinelli, and the TUPACH research team. I'm happy to welcome you here for this final event titled Transforming Heritage, Transnational Projects and Agents. It is the concluding event of the research project called the Transnational Urban Projects Assembled in Heritage Site, that is TUPACH in short. The project focuses on important architectural and urban projects in sensitive areas in UNESCO cities in Italy. This event in particular intends to discuss the varying roles of planners, designers, heritage experts, and local communities in such processes. Before we start, we have a welcome remark by the head of the Department of Architecture and Urban Studies, Professor Massimo Bricoccoli. Massimo, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon to everybody, and welcome, very welcome to the Department of Architecture and Urban Studies. I'm very pleased that there is this final conference here, and I see also a lot of different colleagues from different countries and different regions and different disciplines, and I think this is one of the first remarks I would like to make, because our department is so large that it includes really a variety of disciplines, and I think this is, on the one hand, it's a huge department, more than 200 scholars, and I'm also I'm glad to see some visiting scholars in our department, so it may be a situation in which you really have to orientate because we are many, but this really allows to do interdisciplinary work and to set up research groups which are really matching different competences. And I think this program you have been developing under the Ministry of University and Research funding has really this kind of approach, and I think it's very relevant that in the different partner university, there has been an involvement of a variety of profiles. I was smiling when you said TUPACH, because I thought it was TUPAC, which is a movement in northern, a community movement of natives in northern Argentina. But I think that especially on the topics you have been dealing with, combining expertise and competences on history of architecture and heritage, and the role that heritage has in our contemporary cities, it's really very relevant. I know very, very well. Probably this is one of the sites I've been seeing really developing along the years, since it was it became the trade fair in Vienna, and then it was transformed with a very open building site, which was possible to visit any time in the day and even in the night. You could pass through it. And it has really become one of the hot spots in the city of Vienna, a very relevant reference. So I think these are the kind of projects which are really challenging our role as researchers. In another attitude that I think it's really relevant, and I see that it is developed here, is to combine our roles, our different roles. So we have education, I'm glad to see many students here, but also research and the support somehow, or the analysis and the research we can do on policies and practices. And I think this is, several of the colleagues who are here are dealing with research or policy making, like Laura Lieto. And I think this is really important for us to understand that we are studying and researching in a field which is very much related to decision making, and so our contribution can be relevant. And finally, I would say also that in Italy, so this is an Italian research program, and expertise and the challenges we are facing in a country with such an enormous historical heritage, can really be brought at the international level, and I see the transnational dimension. I think it's really important to confront ourselves with the rest of the world, but also to bring all the competences and experiences we have been developing. So thank you, Davide, for organizing the meeting. Thanks to the colleagues who are part of the project. I'm sorry I have to leave because I have class. now, and I wish you a very nice afternoon.
Thank you, Massimo. I will now introduce the contents of the research project and of today's event. As I mentioned, the research deals with the transnational projects with cultural heritage sites. And in particular, we approach heritage sites and their transformations starting from, in fact, important projects designed by important international firms, architectural firms, design firms. When I say we, I briefly summarize the organization of this national project that includes 3 universities, Federico II University of Naples. The team is led by Professor Laura Ieto and covered 2 case studies. One is the Piazza Garibaldi project designed by Dominique Perrault Architecture. The second case study is the Municipio Square and Station designed by Alvaro Sisa and Soto de Mura. Politecnico di Milano group covered the case study of the Arapacis Museum project by Richard Meyer and the broader transformation in that part of Rome. The third group, the UAV University of Venice team, led by Professor Matteo Basso, studied the cases of Fondaco dei Tedeschi, designed by OMA, and the Constitution Bridge by Santiago Calatrava. You will see more about these projects. In our research, we wanted to understand the networks that were involved in designing and planning processes of such transformations, and how these networks affected the built heritage and the urban transformation more generally. We analyzed networks starting from human actors and organizations near and far, from the very local to the international big firms that worked in this site. In addition, we factor in the materiality of heritage, in particular how projects leveraged certain elements, certain values and understandings of concrete material heritage components. In other words, we wanted to explore how actors and heritage interacted while important projects have been put together over time. So according to our academic lingo, we studied the assemblage of urban and architectural projects in heritage sites. Assemblage is an important keyword, but it's also an important concept because assemblage thinking freed us from a strong academic and public assumption. And I think in an architectural school this is very present, very important. And this assumption is that architects are at the center of such projects. We assume that the architects are the motors of these projects. In our research, we documented that, in fact, these projects derive from large networks where the architect has sometimes very limited roles, and even when it comes to key design decisions. Experts, investors, politicians, and ultimately the materiality of heritage have important agency in defining these processes and their outcomes in contemporary cities. At the same time, we realize that heritage is not static. It can be mobilized by designers, heritage experts, or other actors to support their own action. In some of our cases, we will see later, heritage did not pre-exist the project. It was known, designed, and transformed as part of the project itself. Entire buildings, in fact, were discovered or at least rediscovered in their cultural value through the designing process by multiple actors, not only by the architects, by a multitude of actors and expertise. We see our work we have been doing as relevant, of course, we hope, in the academic debate, but it also it's relevant as the knowledge we produce is usable. So, for example, limiting the attention to the architect's fame and valuing the governance of complex transnational networks can lead to different architectural competitions and perhaps to better urban outcomes. Considering urban and architectural projects as ways of knowing heritage sites rather than expecting the heritage to be there, to be statically and pre-existing and steadily being there, is more realistic in our view, according to what we found in our case studies, and it can better drive the interaction among designers, heritage experts and decision makers more broadly. We explored Italy, of course, but we see the relevance of our findings in multiple cities and countries, as, for example, in the museum quartier here in Vienna and the picture of the poster that Professor Bricoccoli already mentioned and explained. Today's event marks the end of the project funding after 2 years, but by no means the end of the research activities. We intend to go on and to go beyond the boundaries of Italy, and this is also why we invited a very prominent international scholar to give a speech. On top of that, Zachary Jones and I are guest editors for a special issue of the European Planning Studies Journal on this very topic. We have a set of papers being reviewed in other journals, and there is more to come. So we see this as one step in the process rather than the final outcome of our project. Of course, I should stick to the what's planned for today. So the program for today is also very rich. You can find printed programs at the entrance, or you probably received them, so you can follow what I'm about to explain. We're going to have Professor Sandra Guinan giving a keynote speech and a panel of distinguished discussants from quite different disciplines. The researchers then, as the second element, the researchers that who led the case studies will present them briefly, and they will highlight the key findings of these studies. And finally, we will have a policy and design discussion with the Vice Mayor of the City of Naples and a member of the Italian Council of Architects and Planners. Matteo Basso will give closing remarks, and I would, without further ado, I would start co-chairing the first part and invite my partner in this chairing, Professor Carla Tedesco from University of Venice. I will introduce, please come to the stage, introduce our speaker and then invite her as well. So the speech we are going to have presented now, let me see if I can use this also to facilitate the work of, it's titled Transnational Actors and Heritage, a new special icon in historic areas. Sandra Guinan will give a speech. She's currently a senior researcher at the Institute for Urban and Regional Research at the Austrian Academy of Sciences, and he is an associate researcher at IREST in Paris 1 Sorbonne University. She was a visiting scholar at the City University of New York, Johns Hopkins University, and University of Vienna. And her research interests are urban regeneration projects and socio-economical transformation of urban landscapes, with a specific focus on heritage, as we will understand briefly, public-private partnerships, and tourism and visual methods. I invite Sandra to the stage and leave the floor to her immediately. Okay, you can use the arrows or the clicker as you want.
Yeah, this is just. Oh.
I think it's this button.
No, it's just that I wanted to have, if I want to show something. Okay.
It's not very
Okay.
big, but it's...
Thank you. Well, I mean, thank you for this introduction, and thank you also for this invitation. I'm thanking Davide and Zachary for the invitation, and also the whole team of the TUPACH. We have to say not TUPACH, right?
As you like.
Okay. So I'm looking forward to the conversation and to the discussion, and also to get more knowledge about the outcomes of this project. I always kind of feel that I have to kind of situate myself a little bit, and I have an interdisciplinary background. having studied political science, and then moved to urban planning before doing a PhD in urban geography. And I'm not promoting my books, but it's just so that you get an understanding also of the research that I've been conducting. So basically from my PhD studies, I've been very much interested in knowing how public actors deal with heritage in urban regeneration projects. And from that work, I moved doing a postdoc, as it was mentioned in the US, where I became more aware, doing field work of private intervention in this urban regeneration project, and how, in fact, private actors were also involved in this preservation or not of this object. And of course, when you study or when you look at urban regeneration projects, the tourism dimension steps in very quickly. So this is also one of the dimensions that I've been studying. So I wanted to start this conversation by talking about James Rouse. I don't know if you're familiar with James Rouse. Yes, of course. All of you? No? Well, James Rouse was one of the most influential urban planners and property developers in the United States in the 70s and throughout the 90s. In the 50s, he founded the Rouse Company, a major real estate company that was specialized in retail and commercial real estate. And he came up with the concept of shopping malls and was kind of an idealist entrepreneur, as he was also committed to create a fully ideal planned community through the elaboration of a new town called Columbia, which was conceived around principles of racial and economic integration, shared public spaces, and walkable village centers. So Rouse envisioned it as a place that could make the world work better. So as an entrepreneur, he was born in Maryland in 1914. He wanted to change the face of American urban centers, which in the 1950s were losing population, were also considered unsafe, and losing ground in terms of economic vibrancy. So economic actors were indeed very keen in bringing back the middle class and the white collars in these city centers. So one of his most famous achievements was the realizations of festival marketplaces, which were lively mixed, mixed-use waterfronts that were blending commerce, culture, heritage, and public gathering. So one of the most iconic example of Baltimore's of this festival marketplace is the Baltimore's Harbor Place, which helped shape a national trend in waterfront revitalization. If we listen to the different discourses on James Rouse and his achievements, we have discourses that are very polarized. On the one hand, if we listen at public authorities and planners, they saw him as someone who reshaped American urban spaces, concerned on life quality, social diversity, and the creation of vibrant communal spaces. And unlike many developers of his times, Rouse was said not to view the city as a collection of separate functions, living, shopping, working, but as a social organism where human interaction was essential. On the other hand, authors such as Mark Levin, David Harvey, Nicolas Bloom where you have the cover of the book, who critically investigated the renaissance of downtown Baltimore, depicted it as an urban growth strategy. So they denounced the business domination of Baltimore by public-private partnership, the absence of explicit mechanisms linking downtown redevelopment to the revitalizations of low and moderate income neighborhoods, and the inherent pitfalls of buildings an urban economy on downtown-centered corporate service and tourism. Moreover, for Bloom, Rouse was a skilled salesman with an optimistic, market-based urban vision who believed in the capacity of private enterprise to deliver, I quote, a nearly idea of urban order, combining capitalist logic with social rhetoric, suggesting that profit-driven development could also realize public benefits. So if I go back to James Rouse and the festival marketplace, what is of interest to us here is his relation with historic buildings. And here you have some example of the marketplaces he realized. For instance, the Quincy Market located in Boston, which was listed as a National Historic Landmark. And Rouse was in fact one of the first developers to focus on historic sites and buildings and their refurbishment rather than demolition. So for him, this renaissance starts with of city centers, started with the use of heritage as a vehicle for creating this atmosphere through thematized history. And in the case of the waterfront, it was this maritime dimension, and as a vehicle to anchor also identity. So his first project was Faneuil Hall and Quincy Market in 1978 in Boston. And later on, he developed the waterfront of Baltimore on the same principle, and South Street Seaport in New York. So as a subsidiary of Enterprise Foundation, formerly the Rouse Company, Enterprise Development Company was formed to build festival marketplaces for similar cities, and its profits were intended to fuel the charity's endeavors, a tangible product of Rouse's belief that the free enterprise system should have the capability to produce profit for the poor as well as for the rich. So you might ask yourself, why do I tell you the story about James Rouse? Well, as I told you, he was one of the first to deal with this historic building. But also because this model of redevelopment of a festival marketplace did significantly mark waterfront redevelopment around the world. His firm conducting consultancy, for instance, for Darling Harbour in Sydney, the Hood Haven in Rotterdam, or Port Vale in Barcelona. So we could picture James Rouse as a kind of precursor or pioneer in terms of the entrepreneurial city, taking advantages of public-private partnership, and also mobile urbanism, and also shedding, as I said, shedding light on heritage as holding value, namely the economic value, rather than demolishing these buildings and turning them into product for the tourism economy. In the case of Rouse, this was more the domestic economy, tourism. So as Bloom mentions, Rouse was a businessman, had a businessman's utopia, was not purely an economic project, but also a political and cultural statement, American capitalism as the guarantor of modern urban life. So Bloom saw Rouse as leveraging real estate development as a form of soft power in which cultural heritage played an important dimension. So, and looking at these dimensions around cultural heritage, we could look at the forms and the fact that Rouse was also one of the first to use heritage to create displays making and to commodify these buildings. In terms of function, these historical districts became leisure and consumption places. And we saw also with this stepping in of this private actor, the privatization of this spacing, and in terms of meaning, the branding of these spaces. When quoting Rouse and about this privatization of space, Rouse would say, malls and courts must be free of trash and clutter, spotlessly clean, like Disneyland is clean, but not cold, sterilized like a museum. There should be an overall feeling of festival of which the shopper feels a part rather than an observer. Everything matters in creating and reinforcing this kind of environment: landscaping, benches, fountains, banners, graphic signs, merchandise, and merchants. So while we see that, in fact, this example of James Rouse showed that private intervention and transnational actors in heritage is, in fact, nothing new. If we look at the literature, there is little attention and research that has been looking at this intervention and how these actors practice and shape heritage. And as pointed by Hafstein, the boundaries between the cultural, the political, and the market are becoming blurred, which requires critical attention to preservation and heritage conduct. So this is this line that I would like to discuss a little bit further. But before I get into this line of discussion, I would like to maybe clarify what I put behind heritage regimes and also how I frame heritage. So when we think about heritage and heritage regime, first, what I've tried to show, starting with my PhD thesis, is that heritage is no longer the prerogative of official prescribers who come from the top, so the institutions, the international organizations, the state, the city, for example, but is also invested and appropriated by a collection of individuals who also play as prescribers, who will give meaning to something, an object, a building, a song, and create meaning around something. So coming from down, the bottom. Of course, this doesn't mean that the official actors are not active anymore. They are still very present, and they play a full role. but they are not alone, and they do, in fact, recognize and officialize this heritage through institutionalization. What we also see in terms of heritage, it's the growing importance of the intangible dimension in what constitutes heritage. So during my research, what came up is the experiential dimension that is associated with the preserved buildings, which participate in the place attachment, the place belonging, and is also strongly supported by and fostered by tourism mobilities. So we have this also strong relationship with emotion and the way these visitors experience and rediscover these buildings and the new meaning they bring to this meaning, bringing also the question of urban authenticity. So it's not also a coincidence where to see that these buildings, this cultural heritage, are associated with festive events such as the European Capital of Culture, Capital of Design, and so on. Because this gathering becomes significant temporalities and stress the local dimension and identities. This intangible dimension is also very strongly marked by the growing importance of the relational dimension, whether it is represented by the one that is established between the element, the heritage, the object, and the individual, but also the ones that this element itself induces, leading to this dynamic and sometimes even ephemeral heritage. So heritage is pictured as something continuously evolving and dynamic. Heritage as a social construct also implies that we have institutional positions that are generated and that some experiences or identities are being legitimized, which means that others are also excluded and are not. And this means that it also creates hierarchies between what is heritage and what is not. This heritage is also framed around discourses and narratives, and I think that Smith and with her authorized discourse insisted on that. And the importance of this discourse also is a performance in which the meanings of the past is continuously negotiated in the context of the needs of the present. We see heritage from the present, right? But we also frame heritage to kind of view ourselves or project ourselves in the future. And saying this, I mean, we see how these objects, this concept of heritage is highly political. Now, if we think in terms of heritage, as I said, it's dynamic, and it's embedded in temporalities. And we could picture it as following a type of life circle, an economy of heritage. And I mean, this is a scheme that I tried to, because I didn't have the file of this photograph, I tried to ask ChatGPT to translate it, but it didn't work very well. So I left it in French, but I'm going to explain it very briefly. So this is something that I attempted to frame when I was doing my PhD thesis. And here I followed Lucie Morisset and her regimes of authenticity, in which she proposed a kind of cyclical approach to heritage preservations. And I try to kind of explore this notion of circular temporality of objects, going back to Walter Benjamin's reflections on world exhibitions. And according to Walter Benjamin, these objects, these world exhibitions, are reduced to mere stimuli, occasional entertainment that have no value for the individual in terms of their content, so being an empty shell, but in their ability to stimulate and to make the observer feel something. So the experience is very important. So based on this analysis, Benjamin proposed a kind of circular perspective on the life of objects, destructions, construction, reconstruction. And so I've attempted to do this with heritage. So at first you have a kind of, which is 0.4, which should be 0.1 maybe. You have this deconstruction, so the object loses its initial value, or at least this value is being diminished and only makes sense to a minority. Then the object is being reinvested by public authorities, for example. And then the old value is either dusted off or newly assigned, only to be appropriated or diverted. So we have an appropriation and a reconstruction of the object's value by a certain group of the population. So we have this, we move from also this classical notion of value, of heritage with this historic dimension to something that is being reinvented and move more towards this experiential dimension. And we could compare this kind of economic circle of heritage to the work from Ecker and Boltanski with their Économie de l'enrichissement, where this economy relies less on the production of new things than it does on enriching things that already exist. So one of the specific features of this economy is to take advantage of trade in goods that are primarily intended for the wealthy and which also constitute a source of enrichment for the wealthy who trade them. Okay, I have to hurry up. So we have heritage regimes that are traditionally in the hands of experts, specialists, policymakers, journalists, who frame this authorized discourse, as it has been coined by Smith, where in fact we now see also the stepping in of these private actors that take part in this heritage regime. So how do they transform them, and can we talk about common lexicon? So I will try now very briefly in the last 20 minutes to engage with this line of discussion and try to see if we could find a common lexicon through different projects located in New York, Marseille, and Budapest. And here I will try to stress the actors' relations with heritage and what it does to heritage. I wanted to say that I will also try to structure a little bit the presentation around the concept of urban project, which can be defined as an operational mode of action entails different scale of actions, different objects, from commercial project to mobility infrastructure, or the refurbishment of public space, and can also be seen as an analytical tool. And I frame it around forms, function, uses, and meanings. But these dimensions, of course, are not exclusive from one another. So if we look in terms of form, I will here talk about the Projet Euro-Méditerranée. And here we can see form in terms of tangible and intangible dimension. For instance, individual built elements or ensemble of buildings as block or urban landscape. We have objects that present form as purely aesthetic, that we may consider as added value to a project. And this may be monuments whose recognitions are uncontested, but other, by contrast, are objects whose aesthetic needs still legitimacy. So here the aesthetic value may be combined with economic value. And for instance, in marketing strategies, the enhancement of forms invoke the aspirations of image transformation. And this, of course, plays not only at the scale neighborhood, but also the city, the regional, and the national or international. So here, public authorities aim at restoring the image of a site, prevailing change in attitudes, rebuilding confidence, enhance safety, and attract new residents, if not new taxpayers. So discourses promoting forms described as authentic, historic, possessing charms or distinctiveness constitute key reference points in these narratives. Form can also hold function of an iconic sign, or, as Pomians mentioned it, a semiophore. So the sign is perceived and read according to means in which it's being produced, disseminated, and received. And it's also important here to recall that looking at these signs means also understanding not only what the image, the form shows, but also what it does not show. And of course, form may also lead to a change in function. So this logic can be found within the Euro-Méditerranée project. And at the time, this project was presented as a driver of socioeconomic revitalization, aiming not only at providing new functionalities to meet the needs of the newcomers, but also as creating new economic hub, as well as upgraded neighborhoods, so the famous trickle-down effect. The project, located north of the Canebière, behind the hill of the Panier, here, covers 310 hectares, and it follows the seafront until the Zaha Hadid Tower, which is the new symbol of the site. What is interesting with the project is that it remains, although here you have this perimeter, it remains behind the port, because the port is still in function. And this perimeter has architectural and landscape quality. You have the Fort Saint-Jean, which is here. which is stopped by has just coined the fort, and who plays as a signal to the entry in Marseille. So this project has been a national interest operation that was launched at the end of the 90s, directly financed by the French state, and also later by the city and métropole. It is located in aire de mise en valeur de l'architecture et du patrimoine, so it is in a protected type of areas. Before it was another ZPPAUP. The French are very good at changing planning systems very quickly, so much that they even changed now. They have a new name for this AVAP, but they are behind, so it's still an AVAP at the moment, although it has changed name. So there are heritage recognized elements, and there is also a collection of architectural objects designed by offices of famous architects. We have Zaha Hadid with the CMA, CGM, Euroméditerranée Tower, Jean Nouvel with La Tour Marseillaise. We have Massimiliano and Doriana Fuxas with Euromed Center, Stefano Boeri with the Villa Méditerranée, Rudy Rucciati with the Musem, Kengo Guma with the FRAC, the Art Contemporary Fund, and so on and so forth. But of course, this collection of star architects elements need rooms, and so consideration for other type of historic building at the start of the project was not a priority per se. And for instance, once the agreements of the project were signed, a lot of warehouses that were located in the area were demolished. And for Renaud Muselier, at the time president of the Public Development Authority, these initial demolitions were serving concretely as a signal for the start of the project. Régine Vincent, in charge of the city port interface at the Marseille port, for instance, mentioned that it was a sign also, this demolition, of the entry of Marseille in modernization. So this tabula rasa of building really was drawing a line between the past and the future of Marseille. But it was also about economic reason and freeing up land. Okay, so I have to hurry up. This doesn't make my task easy. Okay, so then I will jump to so I wanted to mention the Euroméditerranée and Silo d'Aringue. That was the last building, that was one of the buildings that was saved, and this was because of mobilization of the civil society architects who mobilized to kind of save this building. And interestingly, in the discourses of public authorities, then suddenly became a sign for this redevelopment of Euroméditerranée, and was kept and transformed as a cultural venue. And it was, in fact, one of the reasons behind the protection or the safeguarding of the Silo d'Aringue was also because a few years before even the Euroméditerranée project, one developer, Sari, who managed the Défense real estate development, he bought Les Docks in Marseille and commissioned an architect to refurbish them. And this was in 1992. And at the time, this was also, as for James Ross, not seen as something that was acknowledged in the common discourses to save this type of building. But suddenly, once the refurbishment had started and it was accomplished, the mindset changed. Interestingly, the dock renovation was also presented as a landmark, but in 2009, it was also refurbished by Alfonso Femia for constructor Urban System and GP Morgan Asset Management. So it became, in fact, an asset in the portfolio of investors, and it is a space of consumption. And if we think about the past of these areas in terms of the social memory of this place or social history, not much has been preserved in this sense. If we also look at the way it has been, the project has developed around the dock, we see also that the streets and the network is very narrow and doesn't let this element breathe in the urban project. There is a lack of communication and relationship with the adjacent building. I wanted to show another example that here speaks more about the function of a historic building, talking about the Minoterie Theatre that was in the Euro-Mediterranean also perimeter, and that has not been saved. It was demolished. It was bought by a private developer. And it was part of the social history of the port, in the sense that in this theater you could find a lot of artifacts that narrated and told the history about the place. It was also a very important social space. And an interesting also bridge and a passeur, as Davalon would coin it, between, in terms of tangible and intangible dimension, between the past and the present, but also between the old structure and the new structure of the project. So it was making this type of relation. Well, it was demolished, and it was, in fact, the theater was displaced to another area of Euro-Mediterranean, where it was more said to be visible. So it was a heritage through appropriation rather than designation. In terms of uses, I wanted to then very briefly look at the Liget City project located in Budapest, in the 7th district of Budapest. So we have different elements which hold historic dimension in this area. It's also very close to the UNESCO buffer zone. And it has been, as I mentioned, it has been, as it's written, bought by a German real estate and asset management firm, Zeitgeist, who created this Liget City project. And this is also being managed by IDPM, who is a local firm. And the big development, as you can see here on the so this is today, and this is the future project. You see how this project, which is supposed to bring 800,000 euros of infrastructure to contribute to the project with public amenities, for instance, has been raising main concern around local experts and preservationists. There is fear of demolitions and also irreversible intervention in terms of the change of the uses and also in terms of the scale of the project. But for the mayor of the 7th district, this is a means to change the image of this district, which has socioeconomic difficulties, especially at the northern part of the area. I'm moving to my last example, which is South Street Seaport, which is located in New York, and the southern tip of Manhattan. And here we have, interestingly, we go back to James Rouse. You see that this place is also has been identified as a historic district. So interestingly, this former festival marketplace was sold to General Growth Property, which was an American commercial real estate company and the second largest shopping mall operator in the United States. And this GGP took over the seaport lease with the plan to redevelop it and proposed at the time redevelopment of a tower. Of course, there were contestations about this project, and in fact, the 2008 debt crisis came. There was also Hurricane Sandy, so the project was stalled. And GGP went bankrupt, and one of his subsidiaries, Howard Hughes Corporation, rebought the building when became the property. So there was for the developer, for Howard Hughes Corporation, there was this idea of a new shopping venue on Pier 17 at the place of the former festival marketplace, and different type of development that would completely change the function and also attract newcomers to the place. What was interesting also is that they've never been very transparent about where they were going to proceed, never showing any master plan to the community, but also to the community board. So just after the planning process was finished, they announced the development of a huge tower that you can see here on the slides, which of course was not known to the public and the community board. And it drew on the previous plans from the shop architect, which designed here the US consulate in Milan. And the tower was presented by the chief executive as an economic engine that was going to revitalize the district. And there were also the idea of having financial means that would deliver social housing, but also provide school in terms of infrastructure. I think that it's interesting to see also the discourses at the time of Howard Hughes Corporation. With these quotes, we see how they lack understanding of these places and the relationship that this place had with the public and the locals. presenting it as unattractive, when in fact a majority of institutional actors, but also local association, for them this place had never lost significance and had historic and social, cultural dimension. So these dimensions were never lost, but they needed to be kind of rediscovered. And what is interesting also is that the developer was very quick to kind of rework the narrative around the history of the place. And you see, he puts this historic frieze and also kind of rebranded the whole area. So, question, I mean, kind of a question that I've been asking myself, because when I was preparing this presentation, I had the feeling that I was kind of doing a split a little bit with this question of transnational actors and what it means to be, what you put behind these transnational actors. Because what I found, and what I found in my research, is that these transnational actors are in fact very highly dependent of the local dimension and the cultural and professional know-how. And this is, for instance, the case of James Rouse. I mean, he was a native of Baltimore, but he also worked at the Federal Housing Administration before becoming a developer. So he had a lot of know-how about how public policies worked, how programs work, and how to use and take advantage of these programs. What we see with Howard Hughes Corporation, for instance, is that they have no knowledge about the local context and also historic buildings. It's their first attempt, and up to now, they are still struggling at South Street's seaport. If we look at the Budapest example, we see this German firm that also asks these local consultancy actors to find assets. They wanted to invest in Gründerzeit, Zinshäuser in Budapest, but the IDPM consultants were quick to tell them that this was something not possible in Budapest, and then oriented them towards this project of Liget City. So, I mean, I'm almost done. So I think that there is also this question, I mean, making this analogy with Julie Pollard on developers and financializations, there is also this idea that these local actors are kind of vehicles or intermediaries for these transnational actors. And then I think that we should also think about the importance of the relationship of these transnational actors and their relationship with the local. For instance, the work of Pablo Fuentenebro and Bas van Her, they studied the wealth elites and how they shape cities through art-based philanthropy. And they talk about place attachment, and they show how, in fact, this place attachment of these transnational elite also play an important factors in their anchoring and geography. So when we look at these different projects, and I mean, I had to be very quick. I've only showed 4 projects. This is not exhaustive. There are other type of projects. So this is just a few hints and a few ideas that I'm kind of giving as food for thought. I think that there is the question of accessibility. I mean, who gets to use these places, and how are these places transformed in terms of their uses? Accessibility in terms of tangible, but also intangible dimension, the question of recognizing yourself within these environments. The question also of the object selections in this type of project. What remains and what does not? I mean, what types of sort of hierarchies are being established? The question also of transition in terms of time, space, but also scale. I mean, we see that the transition in time sometimes is very abrupt from these old buildings to these completely contemporary ones. In terms of space transition from the pedestrian perspective, and also the scale. You have, if you look at the South Street Seaport, for instance, you see this transition in terms of scale, where you have the high towers looking at the historic district. It's a quite interesting photograph to look at. And also this question of added value and this enrichment process, as Boltanski and Necker coined it. I mean, which kind of added value is being added to this new building, and for whom? I mean, who gets to decide around the value? And I think one other element that came up is also the redistribution of these actors. What is being redistributed, and what is being negotiated on which terms between the different actors. We see a lot of claims about redistribution, but how does it really play out, and who got to decide? So is there a lexicon? Well, I mean, again, this is not exhaustive, and this is food for thought. I'm not completely satisfied with this, but I think there is, again, accessibility, question of exclusivity, privatization, added value, commodification, transition, rupture, disruption, and then section, history, memory, and hierarchy. I'm done. I just wanted to finish with this image. This was passing by with a colleague the other day, and we were smiling, looking at how very clear the different actors around the project are being depicted, and thought that it would be so much nicer if all the project had all this information on their billboards to be able to trace all the actors who are behind the transformation of these buildings. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your speech. I took lots of notes. Your speech was very focused, but in my mind I have both general questions, general issues concerning urban regeneration, and very specific issues concerning peculiarities of urban regeneration drawn on a heritage as a lever for urban transformation. And I was thinking this peculiarity can let us think of the cases you presented as somehow extreme cases bringing issues and conflicting problems concerning urban regeneration to extreme consequences, because they can, as extreme cases, then they can allow us to shed light more generally on urban regeneration and and issues concerning urban regeneration. So, for instance, how can a heritage regime shed light on more generally on urban regime, and how can this relationship between transnational and local actors shed light more generally on the presence of local transnational actors within urban transformation? And the very general issue is who is urban regeneration for? Is urban regeneration for the areas, or is urban regeneration for people living in the area? But my task here is to introduce the discussants. So I have these questions in my mind, and I'll introduce the discussants, and I'll do this immediately. And they'll provide different perspectives on the numerous issues at stake. We need both. We need deep understanding from different disciplinary perspectives, but we also need to cross boundaries between the different disciplinary perspectives. And we will do, in this discussion, we will do this through the architectural history perspective with Filippo De Pieri, who is professor at the Department of Architecture and Design at the Politecnico of Torino. His research focus mainly, among other topics, on 19th century urban planning and 20th century urban conservation. The perspective of human geography with Martin Müller, professor at the Department of Geography and Sustainability at the University of Lausanne, and visiting here at DASTU. Martin is an urban and political geographer, and his research covers large urban spectacles, cultural flagship buildings, and architectural preservation perspective with Francesca Vigotti, who is assistant professor at DASTU here at the Polimi. Her research focuses on widespread heritage as a resource to foster inclusive, sustainable development. So the floor is yours. As maybe we can agree to make a very short, or to cancel our coffee break, so that I can give you at least 5 minutes for your speech, and each discussant 5 minutes. Who's first?
Ladies first.
Ladies first, okay. So please, Francesca.
Okay, can you hear me? Perfect, thank you. So thank you very much, Sandra. Thank you to our chair, and thank you to the other discussants. I found the presentation very interesting. It's a very peculiar and central topic in nowadays, let's say, times. And I want to stress a little bit the theme about different levels of knowledge and acknowledgement of heritage, in a way, no? Because in your presentation, we assisted to trajectories of conflict, of negotiation, and of modified power relations between the different actors, in a way, and in which we saw that the heritage, the buildings, become sometimes a container without situated content, in a way, no? So the refurbishment, it's something that comes from the real estate, and then you think about a content which is not so much place and people-based and related, no? And this has some consequence related to the fact that these projects are often out of scale and out of context as well. So back again to the conflict. So I can really understand why, for example, local inhabitants, but also local municipalities are in conflict with the real estate developers. And I found very interesting in your final slides the question about for whom. So which are the added values and for whom these values are. And again, it turns back about narratives of power, the narratives of heritage. So which kind of value brings bring such complex projects, not only to the city itself and market of the city itself and of tourism market and so on and so forth, but also to who inhabits the city in a way, no? The city or the neighborhood itself. And also about the issues related to the transitions, so what remains and what is not. And I'm not really sure that when you do this kind of refurbishment, something really remains in a way. No, maybe there is just a scenography of what it was before. No, it's a sort of let's say scenography of what could become, and it opens the doors to gentrification. It opens the doors to other kind of investments. And maybe it also opens the doors to the modification of regulations as well. So I think it's very jeopardizing in a way. So I just leave the floor to the other discussant. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm not going to lose time by thanking everyone, but I want to thank Davide, and I want to thank Sanda for sharing this beautiful communication with us. I have 2 points to make. One is very short, the other one is slightly longer. The first point has to do with a sort of professional panic. I'm an architectural historian, as you know, and I sort of feel part of this, involuntarily so. Not necessarily, I don't necessarily want to be part of this, but I recognize I'm part of this. Until a few decades ago, it was relatively obvious for architectural historians to state that one of their principal tasks was to raise awareness about heritage and conservation, make sure that buildings were preserved. People like Nicolaus Pesner or John Summerson were thinking about history in these terms. Today, it has become more problematic when we see what kind of processes this sort of generates. Some of my colleagues maybe want to be part of these processes and maybe want to be on that panel that you're showing there. Some others are not necessarily happy to be there. How to understand our work within this kind of context? We start to have a certain literature about the unintended consequences of historical research. So I feel less as a neutral participant to this round table than as an object of the research somehow, and I'm not happy with that. The second comment has to do with the agents and the cities. I'm sort of starting with the transnational words that is at the center of the project. And the more I think about the transnational aspects of this process, the more I see that there are a number of transnational agents and processes that have to do with the globalization of design and construction, of course, and also with the globalization of conservation. Conservation expertise, UNESCO has been cited as an actor. We have different figures acting as transnational experts or professionals who are active in these places. The origins of these processes in both cases somehow dates back to somewhere around the 1970s or something like that. So these are sort of 2 parallel globalization processes that we are observing. And how do we study those? The research seems to be very much oriented around case studies, and yours as well. And I'm pretty much convinced by this approach. I really think that we need to look into the processes of specific cities, and that the only way to gain a knowledge about this is to really gain a super detailed knowledge of how the specific actors and agents involved in any process are actually moving. We actually have a number of detailed research works about processes of urban regeneration somehow doing this. We also have a number of detailed research works about processes of urban conservation. We have a lesser number of works keeping the 2 sides of the coin within the same inquiry and showing the rationality of different agents related to both the transformation and the conservation of sites, which are the discourses, which are the logics, how do they interact, and which are the both intended and unintended consequences of these processes. This is interesting and somehow should give us a key to understanding what we call the local, which is sort of the specificity of each city that we tend to recognize when we go there, which somehow results from the interaction and the stratification of these processes. So my last comment is about the fact that in order to recognize the specificity of places, somehow, we probably need to to have a look at the plurality of temporalities, not just maybe the short temporalities of the political decision and the interaction, but also the longer temporality of the stratification of actions, understanding, discourses that exist in each city, and explain why certain forms, certain decisions, certain patterns are less acceptable than others in certain situations, and somehow help us to situate a comparison between these processes that are simultaneously super local and super global. Thanks.
So Filippo stopped by speaking about temporalities. And I suppose as a geographer I should speak about spatialities. But that was very nicely covered by Sondra, actually. Thank you very much. I think the spatialities came out very nicely in your talk. I'm going to try and think further along with your thoughts and try to take them maybe in some expected and maybe in some unexpected directions. And I want to do this through 3 questions that I want to ask. Not necessarily of you, myself as well, but to everybody equally. And the first one is, what makes an actor transnational? In what ways do actors become transnational? Because on the one hand, in your talk, I saw that there were investors, but there were also developers, and those were not necessarily the same actors. There are architects, and there are tenants who move into this. And are they all equally transnational? Are some more transnational than others? And how do they become transnational? Through their juridical status, through where the money comes from, through where the expertise comes from. And I think that helps us perhaps also nuance a bit more in what ways they are transnational, rather than saying, okay, they're transnational, full stop. And I also have the feeling that maybe there are some actors that are transnational that we don't think at first glance they are transnational, such as the politicians or the planners, and perhaps even the local communities, in the sense that increasingly everybody participates in the circulation of knowledge, reads about best practices here and there, is ranked. And so how does that play into this? So maybe some actors that we wouldn't think of transnational are actually more transnational than we think at first glance. So that was the first question. The second one relates to the first one, and it's linked to the question that you started with, James Rouse, at the beginning. I would be curious to get back to this one, which is about atmospheres. And how atmospheres in the end become investable, right? Because apparently from the one quote you had up there from the consultant who said, well, it's difficult to invest in this and to make it work. Well, yes and no. I think that one way in which it creates added value is through investing in atmospheres, but atmospheres are fleeting, they're immaterial. So I was curious how those investors become convinced that something that is so immaterial, that doesn't, you can't pin it down and say, okay, this is rent per square meter, and then it translates into a return on investment calculation. How this nevertheless then is transformed into a commodity, a marchandise. How does atmosphere become a commodity? And the last question is kind of thinking further from your 3 case studies. Well, we have the United States with neoliberalism, rollout neoliberalism very prominent, Hungary, a neoliberal transformation, but with post-socialist elements still there. France, very strong state, role of the state also in urban transformation. So how can we systematize this going forward? Is there one way of saying, in some places it works like this, in others it works a bit differently, and what are also the factors that come into play? And I'm thinking about this particularly because when I look at the audience, I see people who are from many other places that we haven't touched on. And so I'm thinking, how does this happen in East Asia? How does it happen in the Middle East, in South America? Are the dynamics that are at play very similar, or would we expect them to be quite different? Thank you.
Well, thank you for all these comments and thoughts, a lot of them. Going back to Carla's remark about this extreme case studies. I completely agree with you. This is also why I was a little bit dissatisfied with the outcomes, because I mean, as I was also struggling with this transnationality of actors, I was trying to find case studies that would fit the transnational dimension. But I have the same issue and the same question. I mean, what do you put behind transnational actors, and what are the characteristics of these transnational actors? And as I was looking also at case studies that I had investigated, this made the construction of the presentation a bit extreme and maybe caricatural in some ways, because I think that there are also very interesting other type of projects and examples that show that you can manage to work with historic buildings and give more back to the community, be more, have more of this, what did I put? This transition with the rest of the territory. If I think of the museum, for instance, in Marseille, I think it's an interesting example of star architect object implemented in a historic area, which works really well, and is also, in terms of accessibility, the museum is, of course, not free, but the way the building was conceived is very open to the community, to the public. And it's very, very well appropriated also by, there are social housing that are located not very far, and a lot of young people actually use this place as a recreational area in the summer. So I think there are also interesting examples that are more positive and less neoliberal, extreme oriented. But I think that what I also wanted to show in terms of, again, this relationship between urban regime and urban regime and urban heritage is how today this urban regime tends to push this and influence this heritage regimes, where they are very much anchored with one another. Then one thing that I also didn't mention when we were talking about this project and the transnational actors is this context that is also very important, and also the long-term analysis. Because if I think of, and this is something very salient, for instance, when you study the city of Vienna, which has a long tradition of having the same party at the head of the city since so many years. And this legacy and this long-term tradition also has a strong influence on project and urban planning. So I think that's also something that through my research, I've been trying to do is also look at this project on a long-term perspective, because it tells you a lot also about the changes in the references and the values with the change of actors. If you studied Euro-Mediterranée, for instance, it started in the 90s. It was first a project, all the studies were conducted by the urbanism agency, Agence d'Urbanisme, And then it was taken over by this national agency. They never looked at the studies of this urban agency, where a lot of elements were there, and important ones. So they had the question of the memory of the project is also very very important, and this passing of the project memory. There was something about the atmosphere.
It was about how atmospheres are rendered investable, how they become a commodity. Because my question was a little bit, is this going to compensate for the additional risk, apparently, that investors see in this? But you don't need to answer this. It's just
no, but I had
ruminations.
I'll think about it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we are back. I'm Paolo Scrivano. I'm Associate Professor of Architecture History here at the Politecnico di Milan, the same department, the DASTU. And I'm here to moderate this session where our group of researchers will present the results of their work. So we are going to have 4 case studies with 5 presenters. I will try to really limit my words just to say that we will see a variety of approaches and different subjects will emerge. I think there are interesting connections already visible with what Sandra presented today and also what the discussion highlighted. So let me just say that we will start with Zachary Jones, who is here from Politecnico di Milan, who will introduce the case, the research on the Aurapacis in Rome. He will be followed by Marco Antonio Minozzo Gabriel. He is here. Are you there? Yeah, I see you. Who represents IUAV Venice with the case of the Fondaco dei Tedeschi. Then the case of Piazza Garibaldi in Naples, Capucine Tournillac at the University of Naples, Federico II. And we'll finish with a mixed team, Milan and Naples, Anita Martinelli, Milan, and Sveva Venter, Naples, on the case still in Naples of the Piazza Municipio, the subway station in that location. So I would say let's start right now, and hopefully we will stay on time and have also some time for discussion and questions. Zach.
Right. Thank you very much, Paolo. Thank you everyone for being here. I hope these sort of, I would say, mini cases, these sort of vignettes, images, provide a bit more, maybe in-depth details or looks at certain aspects of what's already, thanks to Sandra, introduced in some of these discussions. So the Aurapacis Museum is an example of what I've sort of been terming a transnational heritage assemblage. So again, playing with some of these ideas, terms, that really somehow the building itself becomes both a mix of the transnational and heritage, where really protection, this idea of protecting the heritage, played a critical role in its development. So while in other moments when I've presented the case, this has been an hour-long presentation, here you get the 10-minute quick snapshot. And then, so look forward to the future publications, or please find us after. I've lots more I can say if you're really interested. But to give an overview, we're here in Rome. I'm sure most of you know or are familiar with. And the location of the Aurapacis Museum is within the UNESCO World Heritage Site, the historic city center of Rome, within the area within the walls. Which was expanded with the dash line to include a much larger, the sort of historic city beyond the historic center. And so the project itself sits along the embankment of the Tiber River, right next to the mausoleum of Augustus that we see here, and within this sort of the fourth wall of the site of the Piazza Augusto Imperatore. Some brief facts and figures. This is what the final project looks like. You can see the ongoing transformation next to it within the piazza. So the first phase of that has only now opened 20 years later. So the project, the building itself, finished in 2006 after more than 10 years of development, designed again by Richard Meyer and partners. And it was the first entirely new project built within the UNESCO World Heritage Site. So there had been some other renovations, additions, but this was the first new project since World War II. So over nearly half a century, was quite a momentous occasion for Rome, and in part also led to a lot of the discussion, debate, and conflicts that emerged because this was seen as such a critical project from both the local governance, municipality. This project was very much spearheaded by the mayor at that time as a sort of one of many star architecture-led projects being developed in the 90s and early 2000s in Rome, but this was the only one really located in the city center and built entirely around this object of the monument of the Areopagus, the altar of peace, which comes from the Augustan era. So this site, while we often think of Rome as being very stable, it is the eternal city, it is somehow unchanging. The reality of this site is that it's undergone massive transformations, and not only in this example of the museum, but also historically. So we see on the left the Noli map, where this was located next to what was the Porto di Ripetta, the city port located on the Tiber River. And we can see the area around the urban fabric is built up onto and around the Mausoleum of Augustus, which later becomes a theater building structure. In the end of the 19th, early 20th century, this site begins to undergo significant changes when the river roads are built. So much of the Porto di Ripetta, other urban fabric, is demolished, and that's followed by a series of 1930s interventions in and around the mausoleum where Mussolini and his government and architects, designers demolish the site and locate the Areopagus there in a temporary pavilion. And now the site today, as we see it with the Richard Meyer project and the ongoing piazza site. So just to say, this is one of a very complex history and an area, and briefly we see here the sort of before. So this is the pavilion by Vittorio Morpurgo that was built in the 1930s and is what in the 1990s was essentially at that point considered to be damaging the Areopagus through its design and effects. And so there was a need for developing a new museum, so the story goes. And we see now the larger project developed by Richard and Meyer, which was intended to fill in some of this missing urban fabric on this fourth wall of the piazza. So one of the points that emerges from this is really the multiplicity of heritage, that when we talk about heritage, it's not just a single object or thing, but actually there are many layers or dimensions to this, which adds, especially a site with thousands of years of history, can add a number of complications. So one was the strong relation to the ancient Augustan period, which for Rome is very incredibly highly symbolic, and also the physical presence of the Mausoleum of Augustus, the object of the Areopagus. So this is considered often one of the most important monuments, memorials that survives from antiquity, which was again lost and then reconstructed under the Mussolini era, and is somehow a symbol of Rome, and how to, again, build a museum around this object was a huge challenge. Then actually the lost heritage, so the Porto di Ripetta, the theater and buildings around the mausoleum, which were destroyed. So this sort of collective memory of these sites played a very significant role, particularly in a lot of the conflict around the project. And then the rationalist structure of Vittorio Morpurgo in the 1930s, and the wider historic urban landscape of Rome are, say, some of the key dimensions of heritage that emerge. And really, again, through our approach, through our project, our adoption of the use of assemblage theory and actor network theory, we really broadened, expanded our thinking about who the actors and actants were, and this idea of also who are the transnational actors, and so trying to start thinking about and visually representing the complexity of this, which I can't go into full detail now, but essentially the human, actors are being the different circles that we see here, but then all of the socio-material elements, so the physical materials or plans or environmental conditions, these square blocks also very much impacted the process, the design, become really actants. That the project we see today is very much a result of the interaction relationship between these groups. And a reflection on the context. So what was interesting is the strong presence of a 1930s rationalist buildings. These are the ex-IMSS buildings, now the luxury Bulgari Hotel by Vittorio Morpurgo, served maybe perhaps a post-choice justification, but were used to justify the choice of Richard Meyer. So the fact that there was modernism, rationalism here, Richard Meyer as the sort of modernist star architect, this was seen as the way to justify choosing him rather than having a public competition. So this argument that he is the world's best, so therefore we should have him working in Rome. And then the use of travertine in this building. So the fact that this travertine that covers the facade of the ex-IMSS building is the same material that is used in the Aula, which comes from the exact same quarry run by the exact same family. So there's a point of intersection or meeting that the presence of this building led to certain requirements, in fact, about the design of the project. And finally, I would say these sort of reflections that we have on this case are perhaps the need to expand. So part of one of the lessons here is really expanding maybe the thinking of what heritage is, these dimensions, and how that can influence design thinking. So these, especially the lost dimensions of heritage, here you see the theater being demolished around the Mausoleum of Augustus. That maybe had the focus on the project been more inclusive of some of these other elements, might have expanded the design, the thought, and also involvement of other actors or ideas that could have helped reduce some of the conflict. Because in the end, the fact that this approach was very sort of restrictive to the transnational actors and a very top-down approach resulted in a lot of conflict that ended up putting the heritage at risk. So we see here, this is the box, the cardboard or wooden box that was protecting the Aula for more than 2 years while the project was paused, delayed. And so by putting the star architect, this transnational actor at the key role, rather than expanding or involving maybe other voices through other processes, potentially actually put the heritage itself at risk rather than the goal of protecting it. So I will finish there and happily let my colleagues introduce their cases and other issues.
I deal with the Fondaco dei Tedeschi in Venice. The research team at UAV has actually worked in 2 projects. We are presenting today only Fondaco dei Tedeschi because it's our juicier case, but it also involved the research at the Constitution Bridge made by Santiago Calatrava. Naturally, the conclusions that we have arrived for Fondaco are also influenced by the comparative approach that we have taken during this research. The Fondaco dei Tedeschi is a 13th century building, then burned to the ground, reconstructed in the early 16th century, that lies at the very heart of Venice. It is located, as you can see, highlighted there, next to the Rialto Bridge. The position of the building highlights its importance. It used to house the German trades and trade dealt with the Venice Republic. And throughout its 500-year history, the building, after the fall of the Venice Republic, changed functions. During the 20th century, it was mostly the headquarters for the postal service in Venice. By 2009, the building, which had been closed a few years before, was sold to Benetton Group, which is a very big enterprise from Veneto region. And then Oma, the figure of Hem Koolhaas, was invited to transform the former postal headquarters into a magazine building. The luxury store that became to be Fondaco dei Tedeschi was first presented in 2010 during the Biennale of Venice. In this project, Koolhaas understood that the very altered materiality of that building allowed for a greater intervention, which was mostly characterized by 2 elements. One was the transformation of half of the roof into a rooftop, and the second one being diagonal escalators that would be inserted as a crossing elements in the central courtyard. OMA sustained that the Fondaco's architectural relevance had been contrasted with these profound physical changes that it had suffered, especially conservation works that have been developed in the 1920s and the 1930s that have altered much of the original fabric of the building, with the intention of amplifying public access to reopen the ground level towards the vicinity as if Fondaco could become some sort of square and reveal its multiple layers. Interesting, and this is one of the first nodes of this project that changed it drastically, is this agreement that was done with the city council for the loss of public function. As the building was opposed the post office, there had to be a liberation from the city council as to absorb a private function. The agreement between the city council and the Benetton group and the municipality had a clause that tied a €6 million compensation to the full realization of Koolhaas's design as he intended, which then allowed for big, generated lots of buzz and criticism. The point being, the building had not been approved by the superintendency. The superintendency had not been involved in the project to this point. The moment in which the project reaches the superintendency, and the superintendency, with a conservation first logic, understands that what OMA did was trying to downplay the historicity of the building in order to justify very intense modifications. The counteraction was an administrative procedure. The regional direction for culture in Veneto region took the decision off the superintendent's hand. The superintendent was known to being supportive of the project, and sent it to the National Committee for evaluation, virtually shielding the process from the intense local pressure that he has been through since the very beginning. The verdict of the National Committee is that the project was overwhelming and lacked proper scrutiny over the building's fabric. So what happened after the first verdict of the National Committee is the fact that the project had to be radically transformed from the inside. And this is the moment in which local architect Torsello Architettura has been crucial in generating what is at the very end the result of a project as a negotiated outcome. The superintendency, Torsello Architettura, and architects for OMA have operated towards the scrutiny and the verdict of the National Committee in order to create solutions both for the rooftop and the escalators. The escalators were removed away from the courtyard, and the rooftop was transformed into an altana, which the best translation in English should be a terrace, and diminishing in this way the overwhelming intervention. But in 2014, as the building was being, as the intervention was going on, Benetton, the owner, also decided to change the commercial manager of the building from La Rinascenti, which allowed and accepted Koolhaas's vision of a building that has a social function, an urban function, to DFS, which targeted a more luxury clientele. So, long story short, the final project was inaugurated in 2016 and closed in 2025, a few months ago, for the lack of economical sustainability of it. So we see that the changes that relate not only to Koolhaas's project, but by the interior design project, are very drastic to the space. But the case reveals to us an interaction of a multitude of actors, especially in the public and the private sector, that belong to different governance levels and are characterized by different rationalities and resource exchanges. If anything, the presence of the local architect and the work of the superintendent in mediating the process allows us to comprehend that the agents have not been characterized by their predefined roles, by the agency they exerted within the project. Finally, we can affirm that Fondaco dei Tedeschi is a multi-authored project, and the local input here being extremely relevant to the development of the building, apart from the role of Koolhaas himself. The entry of these different actors led to different interpretations of what heritage is. Eventually, naturally, in Italy, the conservation first logic of the superintendency had a heavier weight in the decision-making of the project, and led to the different consequences and the material negotiated outcome of the building. Yet, we perceive that the lack of medium-term and long-term objectives of the transformation, especially after the pursuit of DFS targeting Fondaco as a luxury store, had an impact in the long-term sustainability of the building itself. 10 years after the beginning of the operation, the building is again empty, and the material changes that were made by the project at Koolhaas's intervention will now be put to test on whether they diminish or they manage to keep the historical values of the building.
So the next case study is one of the two case studies that were that we worked on in the city of Naples, and this one is called Piazza Garibaldi. So Piazza Garibaldi is both the name of the architecture project, which was designed by Dominique Perrault Architecture, so the international architecture firm that is also the focus of this case, based in France, but it's also the name of the public square where the project is located. The project essentially consists in two halves, and that correspond to the two halves which you see. How do you click? Yes, on the square, so here and here. Here is the renewal of the public space, and this is the entrance to a new metro station that was designed contemporaneously to the project. And this here is the central railway station of the city of Naples. So something interesting is that, as with the Fondaco dei Tedeschi, Dominique Perrault Architecture was nominated as an architect for the project, chosen. The reason for that is to be dated in a process that is actually quite long, because even though the project only started in 2004, it's actually part of a vision for the renewal of the city's urban mobility infrastructure that dates back to the 70s. And the city of Naples, the municipality, along with the consortium who was in charge of the project, in the early 2000s decided that this transnational architecture firm, this architect, was basically their best bet to have somebody who'd be able to handle this, the work on this fairly, as you can see, a huge space and pretty ambitious project. So this is how it used to be before the intervention. So you can see there was no underground entrance to the metro, and it was fairly chaotic. It's not me saying, it's the word that has been used in some of the local press. And then this kind of halving of the square into that later came on. What can also be seen in the photo here, so especially the one to the left, is that the square is really a link between the central railway station and the rest of the city of Naples. It's essentially this is also something that was really spoken of a lot at the start of the project, that it was the gate, the entranceway to the city of Naples. So those are images of the project. So to the left, the access to the metro station, and to the right, elements of the public space renewal. Now, where does heritage come in this project? Because I've spoken of mobility infrastructure until now. Or actually, it doesn't really come in much, because what happens is that the space of Piazza Garibaldi is situated at the margins of official administrative zonings of what counts as heritage and what doesn't count as heritage in urban terms, and even archaeological terms in the city of Naples, because it's located outside the World Heritage Site, UNESCO World Heritage Site. It was eventually added into the buffer zone, in the sense that the buffer zone was created and it so happened that it overlapped with the space of Piazza Garibaldi, but our research showed that this didn't have much impact. As for local zoning areas, Piazza Garibaldi happens to be outside the Centro Storico. This is because actually it's a square. It's a big, the Centro Storico in Naples is focused on buildings. And so being an open space that is unbuilt, it's essentially not covered by those heritage-based regulations. Along with that, there's a longer history that kind of places it outside most discourses, authorized and otherwise, about the city of Naples. There's the fact that until the 19th century, it's located in an area that until the 19th century was empty, which is to say that it was unbuilt. It was then used as a place to fix railway infrastructures, in the sense of installing those big infrastructures in a place otherwise considered as quite devoid of activities. Today it also suffers, for a number of decades it has suffered also from social stigma, which is associated to, in particular, migrant presence, because being the central railway station square, it's located and connected with other parts of the city, and as in other parts of the metropolitan city and of the region. Like other such cases in Europe, for instance in Paris, the Gare du Nord, it's a fairly complex space in social terms. Now, that said, our research has shown that how, nevertheless, heritage comes in. Well, first of all, we're going to see that it comes in ways that it is leveraged, meaning that it is used to do other things, so for other purposes. What exactly it's doing is another point that is interesting us. So what is heritage mediating? So heritage is used as something, but heritage also causes effects. And a third thing that we're seeing is that some of the effects that this can cause, the use of heritage and its incorporation in these projects, is the production of more heritage, or the reverse, the cancellation or the erasure of heritage. So, like the other projects of our research team, this case study has tended to show quite obviously that the architect is not center of the whole process of this project coming and materializing. Nevertheless, the way we've shown this is by starting but what the architect said and claimed that they were going to do, and to follow what they actually did and what the effects and side effects were. So we have a case here where this firm, Dominique Perrault Architecture, from the very start, I have a quote, so from the very start, Perrault asked himself what would the interaction be between the Piazza Garibaldi project and the central railway station. And, quote, he said he deemed that the beautiful roof, designed in 1954 by Pierluigi Nervi of the central station, was to be a very strong element which would be carefully considered and respected from the very beginning. From Perrault's point of view, this was to be the matrix, the origin of what could later occur in the rest of the project. So this is a quote from one of the architects who worked on the project at the time. And as you can see, so this is the roof in question, so of the central railway station, and this is what Perrault's office came up with. So we have this kind of element of the triangle that is being replicated, and this is a way that formally a homage is being paid. So this could remain pretty irrelevant. No, this could be as in classified in a kind of classic move that architects might do to legitimize in one way or another their project. And maybe it's a stretch to call it, to say it's about heritage. Nevertheless, there is one element that pushes us to think that it does connect with heritage value. This is the fact that, so something is happening simultaneously, is that from the mid-2000s until today, the Ministry of Culture in Italy is putting together this big census where they're collecting information and essentially stories around post-war buildings to demonstrate the value, the cultural value and the heritage value of those buildings. And the reason for that is that those buildings are often under threat because the heritage laws and preservation laws for post-war architectures are fairly weak and don't necessarily always protect them accurately. And in this census features the central station of Naples, which in a way is one way to say this building has heritage value. In this census also features a Dominique Perrault Architecture's project. And in the description of this project, the fact that they have cited the central railway station is used to show that it has value, which means that in a kind of cyclical, self-citing way, we're seeing that this kind of fairly ordinary move of citing this material form, this triangle, could have potentially consequences that would be proper heritage consequences. Second example linked to this project is tied to an still architectural form, but it's connected to another side story. This side story is that, so I've said it's a complex space and social grounds. There are many activities around this train station and Piazza Garibaldi, in particular market activities that happen to involve migrant communities that reside or use the space. Now, at some point in the mid-2010s, the municipality of Naples decided that this market in particular, of which you see the photo to the left, which is the Via Bologna market, had to be removed and displaced. There was a reaction from the local, the merchants and the people who worked and had their livelihoods in this market. They said they basically were refusing it, so social conflict erupted. Because the project was underway, the municipality of Naples asked this French architecture firm, Dominique Perrault, if they could add a few drawings to the project they were already working on, which are the drawings that you see to the right. So this, until now, I still haven't spoken of heritage. What is interesting is that in the documents that they put together to justify the form, those little boxes that they had come up with, those are the photos that they showed to the client, the municipality of Naples. Those photos, the two of these photos are actually from postcards of a kind of Naples that no longer exists, and in particular perhaps didn't exist in the area of Piazza Garibaldi, because the square you see on the top is actually another square. It's Piazza Mercato, non Piazza Garibaldi, which, as I said, was actually an agricultural space and was not a space of a market. And the photo you see to the bottom is a market space in Paris. So we're seeing examples that are harnessing or attempting to harness an idea of heritage, which is perhaps not very well connected with the context at hand. And so this is another example that shows us how heritage can be used to mediate between different things within these international and transnational projects. So, as I just said, yes, heritage can mediate complex processes. The outcomes remain open. So even though I've started with like what the architecture does, what the architect does, what the architect wants, we see that the outcomes are can go beyond those intentions, and that heritage, or potentially its erasure, can itself ultimately be one such outcome.
So good afternoon, everyone. Last but not least, we have the second case study that the TUPACH project chose to analyze in Naples, and in particular, we're going to speak about Piazza Municipio in Naples. I'm Sveva Ventre, and together with me later on my colleague Anita Martinelli from Politecnico of Milano will explain some relevant research findings that we have analyzed. So this case study actually analyzed a project of a metro station, but which is together also a design, the design of a big institutional square in the city of Naples, situated at the intersection of star architecture, metro development, and a layered historical urban fabric. Designed by Alvaro Sisa and Eduardo Soto de Mura within the UNESCO World Heritage Site of the historic city center of Naples, the project required processes of adaptation and negotiation, recalibrating design ambitions to the constraints of the and the demands of this place. As such, the case illustrates how global design practices are reshaped when confronted with local site-specific and unpredictable conditions, like the emergence of further heritage. Some of them, in this case, are archaeological remains from very diverse ages that had a great agency on the final design and on the decisions to involve diverse actors in the process, and also into the decision of when exactly they've been engaged. The project began in 1999 and has spanned more than 2 decades of construction with an overall budget of more than 4 million euro. The first partial opening took place in 2015 with the inauguration of Municipio Station from Metro Line 1, while in the following years other parts have been progressively completed and made accessible to the public. The renovated Municipio Square, the tunnel, which is a connection towards the port, and the Metro Line 6 in the end. Nevertheless, some components of the project, such as the archaeological part, remain still under development. The municipal project was originally conceived within a broader strategic vision, as Capusini has already underlined, of the Metropolitan Line 1 transport infrastructure of Naples, which on the very international stage have been improving accessibility through the expansion of this line. And it has been also strategically located in front of the port, I mean the station, because of the emerging interchange hub linking Line 1 and Line 6. Bypassing conventional design competition, also in this case, in favor of a more curated selection process, renowned international architects has been invited, so Alvaro Siza and Eduardo Soto de Mura. The same approach was used by also other artists that have been involved in the Metro Art program, curated by the direction of Achille Bonito Oliva. Through this initiative, of course, Naples claimed to be integrating art, infrastructure and heritage, adopting a cultural and symbolic strategy that extended beyond mobility and gained, of course, visibility in media coverage and in the public discourse. The selection of Alvaro Siza as lead architect, as a lead architect, was motivated not only by a personal interest of the Metropolitana di Napoli team, but also by his characteristic design language and proven sensibility for heritage-rich environments. Siza had already established a connection with Naples before this project, working at the Madre Museum project, deeply attuned to the Italian approach towards heritage within broader processes of urban transformation. This slide particularly shows how the historical context has been strongly taken into account by the architects in the redesign of the public space, reconnecting from a visual and physical perspective the port and the city, as visualized by the Antonio Ioli painting and his famous representation of the city. The stark interplay between infrastructure and heritage and the role of both human and non-human forces such as archaeological remains and infrastructural push in actively shaping this project trajectory and outcome. Municipio thus serves as a lens to explore how architectural authorship, infrastructural ambition and heritage preservation collide and occasionally converge to produce new forms of urban transformation. As you can see from the slide, the project first encountered major delays and period of inaccessibility because of the large impact of the construction site and the compromises required to adapt the design to a complex and layered heritage context. At the same time, the architect's proposal triggered some various objections from the city, since the design significantly transformed the square's historical appearance. What had once been an area filled with gardens became a wide open plaza, which today hosts numerous events and activities at the heart of the city's cultural life. This transformation involved a diverse group of public and private actors working together in the management of the public space.
So, the project actually addressed different forms of heritage. which are related to the specific location in which the project took place. These multiple heritage dimensions took place in diverse forms, both in material and immaterial terms, with the creation of physical relationships, but also visual relationships. They worked at different scales, from the object scales of the archaeological findings, arriving to the architectural, urban, and landscape scale. And we are also talking about different forms of heritage dimensions in terms of officially recognized heritage, forms of heritage or not. And all these multiple heritage dimensions have been treated differently from different stakeholders, which include not only the star architects, which collaborated anyhow with with a local studio, which is Studio DATS, but actually the project is, as we have seen in the other case studies, also in this case is made by a network of human and non-human actors, which involved also the municipality, the superintendencies, the universities, but not only. The project actually underwent numerous redesigns, more than 14, and this timeline tries to illustrate very briefly some of them, which were actually triggered mostly by the major archaeological findings that emerged during the excavations. Some of these findings were actually expected, but others were not. And in fact, some of them were completely unforeseen, partly because even if some preliminary analyses and historical reconstructions have been made before the project excavations to start, actually it was impossible to know exactly what there was layered underground and in which conditions, but partly also because of the specific decisions that have been taken along the process by different stakeholders, so of course not only the architects, such as the introduction of an entire new metro line 6, that made the excavation area expand, and as a consequence, of course, the projects need to take it into account, and what was planned to be, let's say, a simple metro station actually became something much more complex, which includes a whole archaeological park, and which is connected with this urban fabric of the city. So just to conclude, what we would like to highlight with this case study is the fact that design and redesign is actually and can be considered actually as a collective process, and the project can be a tool in order to mobilize heritage, and heritage itself can be activated, regenerated, and known by different actors for different purposes and in different ways. So in this process of designing, each interaction reflects shifting constraints, emerging findings, and new negotiations. On the other hand, heritage is considered not as a fixed and a pre-given element, but as an evolving one. It is dynamic and is evolving together with urban transformation. And it has its own agency, which can shape directions, direct choices, and shape the outcome of this kind of processes, projects. So thank you.
Well, thanks to all of you. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks for staying within the time limits. And in fact, we are doing quite well in terms of timing. Also, I have to say that what we have seen is just a small portion of I can confirm that. A small portion, a small part of what you have done so far. So it's just a general presentation of a much, much, much larger project, and also a project that has the potential to continue in the future. We have been discussing further, let's say, expansions of this research. There are many venues that could be pursued, and this to say that stay tuned, so more on the screens, hopefully soon. So how we are doing with timing? So just a few comments and perhaps taking some questions. Just two things I wanted to highlight. And the first, of course, comes from my background as an architecture historian. So something that emerges so clearly is the question of authorship. Who does what? No, it's quite surprising still today that the narratives surrounding architecture are centered on a few number of actors, and still today it is this way. These different case studies highlight a different reality. So projects are more complex, more people involved, more actors involved, complex processes, mediation, sometimes results that are the compromise of different forces at stake. And this leads to the second comment, why we are still, let's say, taken by these narratives, focusing on a few actors. Well, among other things, one is legitimacy. So that's, in order to get consensus, it might be, the solution might be to simplify the narratives. And that's perhaps leads to the major point of our research, is to understand in which way these transnational firms or transnational offices can deal with projects that have to do with heritage. And always, perhaps I'm simplifying too much, but you have a reality which is quintessentially presented as transnational, that is non-local, global, with issues that are intrinsically local. So there is this contrast between these two poles. Of course, we could expand the discussion in many directions, as we have done according to our different forms of fields of expertise. Mine, of course, is one that focuses on architecture history, but I think there is a lot of potential. We hope that more will emerge from this. Should we?
Thank you. I think we should go straight to the next panel, and then maybe collect the questions and discussion all at the end of this. So I would invite the next chair, Anna Marson, full professor from UAV University of Venice, and she will introduce the speakers, Marcello Rossi and Laura Lieto. So please have a seat. When you have to speak, you have to push the button until the red light is on. Anna, the floor is yours.
Okay, 2 red lights need to be on. Okay, hi everybody. We're going to keep it quite straight. Because we have not that much time left, and I'm going to introduce the 2 speakers of this discussion, which are Laura Lieto, which is she has a double role. She's deputy mayor in charge of planning at the municipality of Naples, and as well as professor of urban regional planning at Naples University, Federico II University, and Marcello Rossi from Gonzales Rossi studio of architects in Milano, but he sits here representing the Italian National Council of Architects, Planners, etc. Yeah? And I have 4 questions for them, which relate with the policy implications of the case studies we have been working through in our TUPACH research, and as well as in other case studies probably. Okay, sorry. Most cases seen today had very little to no community or bottom-up input into the project, except through some public outcry and criticism from local elites. And so the question is if you see a way for stronger public debate, participation, or more open design competitions to play an increased role within these design processes. And if you think that such a larger role for these contents might improve the embeddedness of transnational project, and here the question is what really slow the implementation of these projects down at later stages. We are used to here to listen to the fact that too much bottom-up input bring the risk to slow down the project. Is it true, or is it the reverse perhaps? So please keep as short as you can.
I don't know if you, okay.
Thank you so much, Anna, for your question, and hello everybody, and to all my esteemed colleagues and friends and all of the people in the research network. First of all, this kind of projects are not well equipped to be open to public questionings and participation. I mean, this is not in the organization of these kind of things, first of all. So that would require, but if you focus on public scrutiny and participation as just something which comes before the project is done, this is one thing, okay? So in that case, these things are not equipped to do that. And usually they're not open to the public, even when they are, ordered by the public. But when you think in terms of, there was something interesting about temporalities that has been addressed before in the in your speech. But when you think about these things, when they get into life, when they become something, and so they're always a matter of public contestation, and especially they change over time, and so people, different groups, and people from all walks of life can appropriate these things in a different way. So if you think in terms of participation as something which comes first, this is usually not the case. But if you think in terms of how the public reacts to these kind of things, I mean, the public is very, very active in this kind of things, very much active in this kind of things, as they should be, because heritage is a very contested place. And of course, when heritage changes, it changes a lot of things, and it changes the perception of the public. And so things can get really messy in certain kinds. And also, I like the example of the Fondaco dei Tedeschi, which is a really nice case of the public revenge over something which didn't go well. So yeah, so I suggest that this bottom-up thing should not be conceptualized as something which necessarily has to come first. It's something that goes along the whole process, and it never really stops.
Yeah, the issue is which are the reaction, which is the space for public participation, and which are the action, of course. Marcello, sorry.
Okay. Thank you so much for the invitation, first of all, and I apologize for my English, especially I feel like a carpenter here. You are all professor and something like that. I'm just an architect. I don't know. So I bring more my experience rather than my studies or something like that. And then after that, I'm an architect. For some years, I have this funny rule in the National Council of Architects, that is the organization that joins all the architects in Italy. So I have this perspective from our organization. It's a very difficult question, yours. I'm thinking about the participation process. I don't know, the one of Giancarlo De Carlo or something like that. And I think they are not really effective. So I don't think it's possible today to think that they can be useful. For example, I had the opportunities to win a competition 25 years ago for a municipality of Collegno. This competition had one step after the competition with the participation process with the local communities. We won in two different studies, one for the building, one for the environment. We were the one for the environment. At the end, the building was not done, because at the end of this participation process in Collegno, the local communities reacted against, and the municipality was not had not the capacity to sustain it, and so at the end it stopped it. So in my experience, the bottom-up participation process can be useful only for small communities and for very specific sites. Like, I don't know, if you build an office for the people that will go in this office, maybe me like an architect, if I do that, I can do a participation process with them because they have a specific use and perspective. On the other side of this very large scale, I can bring another experience, that is the we did with CRESME, that is an institution that studies the construction market and the specific design profession of us. We made a study comparing 300 cases of schools built from 2015 till 2024, so in the last 10 years, trying to find which were the strategies more effective in order to respect time, to respect cost, and to respect qualities. So in order also to involve the people, and so I can bring this experience. So they studied 300 cases, so almost all the school built. 100 then were the main studies that they did, shared all over the Italian territory, big schools, small schools, and then I make it very fast. Maybe I will give you also this study that is very interesting. At the end, the architect competition was the most, the fastest, more than appalto integrato, so the direct contract to the companies that build, and more than l'offerta economicamente più vantaggiosa. In Italy there are almost three.
We come later.
Okay.
To this
Okay. So a very at the end a very useful process can be this one of the competition is really a good opportunities for local administrations. Sorry.
Okay. No, perhaps next question permit us to come back on this issue, because the question is about the fact that this kind of project, for instance, the Fondaco dei Tedeschi, which so clearly reveals the potential downsides of luxury projects, put seem to put private actors in more of a leading role. And therefore, the question is, what can local public institutions do to better, to put inside a better governance, to put in place a better governance of the processes, yeah? And a governance able to deal, for instance, with issues of limiting public access to heritage sites, like the Fondaco dei Tedeschi ends up now to have done, yeah? And in governance, of course, the issue of participation comes back. Yeah, Laura.
You know, I'm really not sure. I mean, it depends. It depends on many factors, because in the case of the Fondaco dei Tedeschi, you deal with a private property, and this is a big difference. I mean, when it's the public that owns the land, owns the property, and so it runs the process, it's completely different when you deal with something which is, you know, based on private property. You have a private contractor, so the rules are different in a way. In a sort of sense, in the sense that power is really distributed in a different way when you deal with private property or public property. But on the other hand, we have planning rules and regulations. And again, I mean, all these cases, they all deal with, you know, ecology of norms, which is pretty important, especially in Italy, and the public can actually make a difference when they, you know, deal with norms and regulations, because of course, I mean, this is not just a straightforward method so that the public, you know, has total control of the process, but it can be a really good leverage. It depends, of course, on the administration, it depends on the municipality, it depends on the institutions that are involved in the process, but still we have, you know, planning norms and rules and regulation in terms of preservation and all of these things. And so in general, in the abstract, we have a lot of, you know, means to actually control how it goes. So the private actor coming from, you know, a global real estate firm, this does necessarily mean that these guys are more powerful than anybody else. That depends on the context, it depends on the property, which is a, you know, very big difference between one way or another, and also it depends on the institutional context.
So what about from you, seen from the architect practice?
Yes, very quick. I think the only answer is the public must do specific, simple, and very clear rules, and that's all. For example, the problem we have in Milan now, where it's almost impossible to understand how you can develop a site, an area, because of these 80 years old rules, and then regional rules, and then local rules of the municipality that are even one in contrast with the other. Is almost impossible to find a rule. The private has only one main aim, that is to get the most also benefit and from this area, and so there are only the rules that can share the benefit to all the population. And so I think is the most important thing is to have a government, a central government, that simplify the rules and that gives specific and very simple rules, and then the local municipalities and region that apply them and give which are the main aims in order to deal with the privates. The aim of the private is very clear, and the rule of architects when a private arrives is of course the quality is what we have, but the quality is not the solution is just an opportunity, a better opportunity, but is also it's not possible that we are the director, like in a movie, the director that coordinates everything, but the decisions are always taken outside of our job, and so it's very different. I think the rules is the main answer.
Well, as a planner, I would have a different perspective, but we do not have, unluckily, the time to go into this issue. And well, now let's come to competencies, because there are not just architects' competencies involved in this project. Since large-scale or highly iconic transformative urban architectural project required involvement of many different stakeholders and experts. So how do you specifically see the role of the designer, architect, planner, etc. in these cases? And what about the role of other more specific competencies about preservation, structural engineers, etc.? How can we improve the selection processes or the competitions, the form of competitions for developing projects in complex heritage sites? Do these examples, case study we have been dealing with, show any way forward?
Of course, the best thing would always be to select the best ones on the market. But the interesting perspective that this research brings about using assemblage thinking is that there's no longer such a thing as the designer. And all of the cases and all of the, the discussions that we've been having throughout is that the agency of the designer is something which is really distributed and is no longer concentrated into some, fantastic, famous star architect, or and it's interesting because if you think of design as a distributed agency business, if you think of design as a process and no longer as the act of doing something which is signed by somebody, the whole discourse about competencies actually changes. So from the standpoint of local administrator and knowing a little bit about Codice degli Appalti, which is the national code of public works, for example, there is still so much work to do. Because on that standpoint, what the public actually does is to select the usual, competencies, which means the architect, the engineer, or somebody, expert into some, construction kind of specific field. And it's interesting if you think about the design as a distributed agency kind of process, to reform the idea that the designers are just the architects or the engineers and everything, because there's a designing community that can, that is congregates within this kind of project. So, of course, competencies matter, but I think that what matters the most is to know that competencies are a matter of networks that come together and that, display their abilities and competencies throughout a distributed agency kind of process.
Well, at the same time, I'm sorry, Marcella, I'm going to give you the voice, but there is a kind of contradiction, if I may say, between the initial statement you made about the fact that we need to select the best one on the market, and this distributed competence agency. No,
Anna, I don't see any contradiction. No. I mean, my idea, when you talk about competencies, of course we want the best competencies that we can get when we do something. But the idea here is not just about how good a competencies can be, because the competencies must be good. But the idea is that there's no such a confined field or even body where the competence is concentrated, which is the designer. The idea is that competencies must be congregated within a network, which is a distributed agency kind of a process. But I like to be contradictory, and I think, yeah.
No. I agree with you. First of all, the architect, like in the 50s, I don't know, Asnago Vender, that had, I don't know, an office with 5 people inside and made everything. It's no longer possible. Today, each project has maybe 50, 100 people working on it. If it is just the building of a new school or something like that. So it's really an interaction of many different competencies, in technical, engineer, acoustic, thermal, and of planners, of social use, of rebuilding after the end of use. So there are really different competencies that even the office of the very famous international firma, in Italy we have very small. We have studios with 30, 50, 100 people maximum. If you see abroad, there are studios with 10,000 people working inside. So the leader of them cannot follow everything. It's really a community devolving. So even inside the office, the archistar is a little part of the process, and in process in Italy or where they work, that they must be done with very different people working on it, and maybe the architect is only the director, but that coordinates so many different capacities.
At the same time, the question was how to improve the selection
for
of
example,
these competencies if they are so distributed.
Yes, for example, like this is a very simple example I can do. Like National Council, we made a platform for tenders in 2 phases. The first phase is very simple. You can participate with, like you do 4 or 5 sheets of paper in A3, so very easy, where you show your idea. After this first phase, you have a second phase where the one that made the tender select 5 projects or maximum 5, and then in this phase you must select all the team that will work on it. So then we are, for example, look at also at the name of the National Council of Architects. National Council of Architects, Planners, Conservators, and Landscapers. So just this explain how it's changing our profession. And in this second phase, you put the engineer, the structural engineer, the acoustic, all these very complex system that you must join. So this tender, we have a platform where we have a typical tender that any public administration can use. It's very easy to do that. For example, we did 300 competition last year. In this year, 5. So yes, because at the end of PNR and all these things, all the public administration, I think they stopped at any new idea. But exactly. So now in this year only 5 or 6. But in any case, this is an opportunity, a bottom-up opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much. I come to last question that has to do with the specificity of Italian cases we have been dealing with, in the sense that in Italy, heritage values, specificities, preservation, generally speaking, are more relevant due also to the richness of a heritage and density of it, while other countries may be more open to changes. Therefore, what lessons you think the Italian experience could provide internationally? And what does this mean for transnational firms working in Italian heritage sites?
My first response would be for transnational firms working in Italy, it can be a nightmare. But I still believe that, I mean, now let's get serious. I still believe that our country and this specific context can teach an incredible lesson to all those who want to engage with such issues in terms of, as you said, the richness of the heritage, and so the variety of cases that you can deal with. And this is very important if you think that we have the whole catalog from the Greeks on. So you have an incredible variety of things that you can deal with.
So before Greeks?
See, some parts. We also have the Egyptian magicians in some places. And of course, the variety is one thing. And also we have one of the most complex, if not complicated and articulated systems of norms dealing with heritage. And this is something that it's really, it can be, of course, a huge constraint, but also many of the norms, think of the landscape, Anna, that you are an expert of. Most of the norms are something that really speak for the public and on behalf of the public. So even, and this is another aspect that it's really important for firms or agents coming from abroad and that want to, you know, deal with the Italian system. Of course, as a downside of these things, as we all know, Italy is one of those places where this kind of transformations are more difficult to do because of cultural, because of the mentality, because of the culture, because of the norms, and this makes the whole thing, of course, more difficult and complicated, but it makes it more clear in the sense that heritage is an extremely contested place of our society. So if Italy can be, you know, an interesting place to for this kind of issues, is mostly because we have an incredible public history. We have an incredible entanglement of heritage with everyday life. And to me, this is the most important, you know, lesson that our country and also other countries in Europe especially, but not just in Europe, can teach to all those who are interested in engaging with such things.
Marcello.
Yes, I had one point more. We have these incredible heritage sites. Every week I go in Rome. I was with an architect that told me every day I do 5 kilometers from my house to my office. It's like all the Louvre areas, and I visit something like a complete Louvre every day. So just in Rome, in one side. So we have this, and another things we have a very weak territory. So because of earthquake of this, and we join this half of the total heritage maybe in Europe. And then this very weak territory. And so we had to develop a specific skill, technical, social, and that is unique in the world. So we are really the leader in these things. both in the structural, on bricks, on concrete, on wood, so in the specific technical skills, and then in all the heritage, social impact that they must have. So, and this is recognized all over the world, for example, and then we have also, for example, protezione civile, civil protection, I don't know how to say that, has a method that is studied all over the world to interview, in case of earthquake, on the historical buildings. And this is another skill we have. For example, like a National Council, we are participating in a project in reconstructing Ukraine, specific on the heritage buildings of Ukraine. And what we are doing with UAV, also in collaboration also with them, some technical lessons on the how to interview immediately. So how to coordinate with. This is also done by an architect that is in the army in Italy that do this lesson. Then how to do a immediate evaluation of the damages, how to deal with the people living in these places, and then all the technical solutions. So we are preparing some lessons for the Ukrainian architects in this Ure called project. So we have really a specific skill that is unique in the world. This is our and is really Italian, this one.
Yeah. To the issue of rules, because both of you have agreed somehow on the fact that we need to use rules in terms of clarity and specificity and also simplicity of rules somehow. At the same time, the history of dealing with heritage within the Italian institution has shown over the years a confrontation between an idea of having few simple rules, and that's what the national government has done in the latter years about single housing project, how to say, the intervention in, for single buildings. And that has complicated a lot at the same time the life for people used to a planning tradition where interpretation plays a role. The way you involve the different stakeholders plays a role, etc. So I think this is an issue that would need further investigation, perhaps, in our case studies. I don't know if you want to, you think it's interesting to add something to this?
No, I think you're right. This is one of the things that we should investigate more and discuss more, and especially to have a tighter and closer confrontation with the world out there and see how it works. And because usually, I mean, at least in the academic world, we usually think of norms, rules, and regulations as something out there or something that works in the abstract, or that are written on the stone, carved on the stone, as I usually say, which is not the reality of norms. Our norms are very plastic tools that, you know, get into the assemblage and are subject to interpretation, of course. There's an important power that public institutions have, that is discretion, for example. And we should discuss more about these things. And especially research should get closer to the reality of decision makers and rule makers and public servants and all of the people that actually, you know, deal with norms and regulations every day. Because this is the practice that is actually sometimes is is really missing within the picture. And yeah, so I agree, we should work more on that.
Yes, I also agree. Is maybe, for example, here in Milan now is one of the most urgent things to do. What happened, for example, in Milan was in front of this very complex system of rule. First, the region in 2005 with Legge Regionale 5, then the local plan of Milano tried to facilitate the transformation, the interview, and so what happened was that the private had without a specific knowledge of the rule, a lot of freedom in deciding, and what happened was that everything was done following some rules, the local one, that were in contrast with other rules, so the ancient Italian one, so the one of the 1942 and so on. And so, and the point is to investigate is really this, how to preserve the public interest, and in contemporary to simplify, to have fast times and not long times. So it's really the point that we must reach. There are a lot of rules now on the regeneration or reform urbanistica and so on that are on the table of the government. And this is really the main problem now, especially here in Milan.
Yeah, and I think we shall not simplify too much the issue of dealing with the rules. It's a social construction as well, the interpretation of a rule, etc. So hopefully we will have the chance to come back to these issues and that more. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will now bring the event to its last stage. I invite Matteo Basso from the University of Venice to join me on stage, and I would open the floor for the survivors if they want to make comments and ask questions and engage. I understand it's getting late, we are winding down a bit, but just some 5 minutes to share more thoughts and even questions from colleagues, students and whatnot.
Before Laura goes, I'm wondering about this question of rules, and I'm thinking of critical heritage studies, so heritage studies that think with assemblage thinking and think with like non-human agents, and really complicating very much the fact that heritage is a social construct, like going quite far and saying what makes something heritage, what makes something not heritage, like who decides and what does it do. So if we follow this trend and say, we really have to complexify what counts or not heritage, to the point that maybe even the category of heritage kind of dissolves, then how on the other hand, like I feel it's opposite currents, like on one side going towards this, which I feel is needed, and on the other side going towards developing really powerful, clear, we've said like fast track rules, perhaps even to make it so that heritage can be dealt with in a way that goes for the public good. Is the question, clear?
I don't think it's a question. I totally agree with you. If you focus pretty much on the heritage as a concept and as a notion, and you look at it within the process, rule-making or decision-making or whatever, of course the object fades away. But I totally agree with the fact that it's an interplay, it's an assemblage, and it also depends on the context, on the money, on who's in charge, what the political condition is, whether there's somebody or there's nobody that is ready to take action on something, and so there's no such a thing as we have the heritage and we're ever ready, whatever it takes, to defend the heritage, to have an idea and a common understanding of heritage. I mean, you guys have been telling the whole afternoon that heritage is dynamic and in flow and contested. So that's what it is. So that's why another thing on the agenda, Anna, should be accountability and responsibility. You know, because it's not just, you know, speculating about what's the right norm, what is the right rule to use, but mostly who's in charge, who decides, on behalf of whom we decide. So there's no, I mean, I was just joking, of course it's a question, but it's not something that we should, you know, just, you know, finish with just a quick answer, because this opens up a new field of inquiry. And one of the things that I think that we should think about is accountability and especially responsibility. Who's in charge and on behalf of whom?
Thank you. Thank you. I will keep the mic going. Anyone else has comments, questions, more to share? Okay. So I will then leave the floor to Matteo for final comments and a close.
Sorry. So I will try to very briefly sum up. I mean, it wasn't an easy task to squeeze 2 years project, the TUPACH research project, into 2 hours, 3 hours discussion. But what I tried to do was listen to the presentation from our keynote speech and then the discussion we had this afternoon, and also think about sort of major insights and sort of takeaways that the research projects that we have conducted so far are able to give us. I think that we can divide 2 different kinds of takeaways. On the one hand, there's the research, the academic side of takeaways, of major insights, and on the other, some practical insights that would be helpful as guidelines that we try to develop during our project for institutions or actors dealing with transnational projects in heritage-rich context. So on the one hand, starting from the academic, theoretical perspective, we saw that, and I think this is really relevant for scholars in the field of policy making, urban studies, but hopefully also for architects, is the fact that we saw projects are the complex interplay between a wide range of actors, actants, we call them agents, in star architect policy making. So it means that we saw the decision-making arenas are crowded with different actors, with different rationalities, and exchanging, as we try to show with the cases we have developed in our research, exchanging different kind of resources. This is the chain of connectivity, Sandra, you were talking about. So people, object, practices, you know, assemblage and create this sort of regime through which these networks of human and non-human actors actually developed the projects. So the second takeaway is the fact that we have actually challenged the idea that the star architect is the premier, you know, the most important figure within the design process, and we highlighted also with the this last dialogue the fact that the design architect, the star architect, is not somebody, you know, above the context or outside of the context. She actually has to work and to deal with the context in order for the projects to be implemented. And it also means, third point, that the final outcome, so what we see today from this design process, is something very different from, you know, the original star architect aspiration ideas. So it's constantly being, you know, remanaged given another meaning. And the fourth point is what we were just saying in the last few minutes, the fact that the heritage is not a given object, obviously, is a social, as you mentioned, social, cultural, constructed object, and it's the result of a process of meaning making. I think that these are really, really important, theoretical takeaways that are really important in order to better understand the policy making and enter into the policy making process of such transnational design projects. We also said at the beginning that our TUPACH projects intended also to produce some kind of usable knowledge. We try to work with different actors in a workshop we held in Naples in April to sort of define some guidelines that would be helpful for policymakers and designers to better design and implement Star Architect project, international projects, very sensitive to the different contexts. We used three terms: accessibility, heritage accessibility, heritage protection, heritage valorization. I think that some of the points we sort of reflected upon during the workshop and during our research were confirmed today. In terms of accessibility, projects should consider how they enhance the accessibility to urban experiences, to other kind of heritage. We saw in Naples, the fact that the Transnational project, when implemented, was able to, to let people discover heritage dimension that people were not thinking about. So the archaeology value of the discovery they were doing once, building the projects. Obviously, enhancing the accessibility to urban experiences and heritage to different groups. We mentioned, because heritage is a social constructed dimension. So different social groups, residents, tourists, business owners, the institution, and so on. Obviously, it also means being very careful, because we need to balance, or projects need to consider the risks of being highly accessible in terms of protection and the balance between accessibility and the exploitation of heritage. In terms of protection, we saw many examples. The fact that projects should consider multiple heritage dimensions. The case of Rome was very important on this case. The individual objects, the lost heritage, the urban, the historic urban landscape, so different scales. Projects should also understand the urban materiality, the heritage materiality in depth, in order to better contextualize the projects. And obviously give voice to different actors in building the protection policy connected to heritage. And then in terms of valorization, I think that probably the case of the Fondaco was among the cases that we developed the most powerful. The project should find a balance between preservation, conservation issues, and obviously the economic appreciation and the opening, the accessibility to the heritage. So this obviously calls into action the balance between medium-term goals. We saw in the case of the Fondaco the economic rationality linked to medium-term goals, the transformation of that kind of object into a luxury building, and the long-term sustainability of such operation once the economic and political scenarios changes, and that call into I mean, they call the fact that you need to reflect on what to do with those spaces that were highly modified. And obviously also to avoid such sort of introverted architecture, close to the public, very much privatized, not open to a public accessibility in a broader term that we have discussed today. Thank you so much. I hope that these points were helpful to sum up and to fix some points. I don't know if there are questions from home, probably. No? Okay. Perfect.
Okay, yes, thank you for being here and there online. We appreciate also the presence of dozens of people attending online, which is very good. We will go on with our work and keep an eye out for the publications and the continuing discussion. We will try, put together, assemble in the coming months. And thank you again. And that's it. Thank you.